Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm David. It's been a couple of months since I visited my parents and I've shown you lots of footage of the viaduct module and all the extra scenic work I did on it, including painting the back scene and adding all those trees, etc. Well, at the same time, you will have seen I did build the next module of the layout, which is just a simple raised track going behind or through a village scene. So you can see today I'm going to be showing you how I built the baseboards, a little bit on how I did the wiring and the back scene, and then we'll get into the scenic progress on this in a future video. So you can see I've got some plywood here. Now this is different from how I've done it in the past. In the past I've cut all my own wood, but for the ease of time, because I'm actually not here for very long, so I wanted to save some time and also to get it more dimensionally accurate, I've actually got it all pre-cut. Well, most of it is pre-cut. So you can see these are all perfectly identical, perfectly square, they're sanded already. I would never be able to cut 3 pieces to line up so perfectly like that. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get my plans out. I'm going to put together the basic framework, and then we've got to start working out how to cut this this board here apart, because it's actually going to be slightly different to how I've done things before as well. Okay, so my time-lapse didn't quite record properly there, but I've actually got the board pinned up and glued together. So you can see there, I just used a pin gun, which is actually the same type of pin gun that I used last time, but now I've bought my own, so I don't have to borrow my uncle's, and actually bought a slightly bigger one. So at the moment I've got 25mm brad nails in there. It does go up to 32mm, but I don't think there's any need. The brads are kind of just there to hold it together whilst it glues up, and the glue should be the main strength. It's looking really good, really lovely and square, and everything's flush, and yeah, I'm really happy. I think I'll definitely be getting the wood pre-cut again in the future. Okay, so you can see I've got this cut roughly to shape. Now if I place it on here, I think that lines up quite well. So this will just allow the scenery on this scene to line up perfectly with the scenery on the next. Now you'll notice this end of the baseboard rests on a little lip here. It just rests on this baseboard here, as this is the lowest board in the layout. And then ideally in the long run, there'll be legs on each baseboard. I'm not really sure how I'm going to do the legs at the moment, as for now I've actually been just putting this baseboard on top of a table, and I want to continue putting the other baseboard on top of the table, but of course if one end's resting on here, the other end's going to be floating in midair. So I think what I'm going to do is add some little legs out of 2x4, just to bring this next board up to the same height as this one. I can of course eventually remove those legs if I need to, but I think I'll leave it as is, because then it just allows me to set up these 2 baseboards on any flat surface before I work out what legs I'm going to use in the future. Okay, so I cut out some pieces there, and you can see I've just been round and I've levelled it all off. So what I've done is I've cut those a little bit short. I've then clamped them up and glued them, and I've used a ruler just to measure. It's actually 192.5mm is the measurement I got from my computer, from that bit of plywood to the top there. I've also come along then, I've used some spirit bubbles. I've sort of tried to line it up with, I put them on this bit of plywood first just to see how level the floor was, and then I've tried to line up best I can. The floor's actually pretty level, so this board has come out almost perfectly level as well. And yeah, so I'm just going to let those glue up a bit. Might whack in a couple of pins. Again, I probably will remove these legs in the future. This is really just so this board sits at the right height to be level with the viaduct scene. But yeah, then we can crack on and do the next bit. Okay, so those little stilts are all glued up, pinned on, and it's looking good actually. It's nice and solid, really solid and level. I'm glad I've actually upgraded from, so for the last board, the framework was made of 12mm ply, whereas for this one over here, it's now 18mm. And again, for the last one, we had a 6mm top. For this one, I'm going to use a 9mm top. Just so I noticed there's a little bit of sagging going on with that 6mm top there. Now, because I've got this all perfectly level, it doesn't quite sit on that shelf. But fortunately, this doesn't actually butt up straight to that board. Of course, if I grab down here, if I grab this piece, this actually slots in just here and sits on that shelf. And of course, because we cut it based on that shelf, it doesn't really matter that the shelf's not level, if you see what I mean. And then this one just butts up perfectly against there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some glue on the end of this piece and pin it in to the end board. And then these boards should marry up really nicely in the future. Okay, so it's a tiny while later, and it's now time to cut out the track bed. So what I'm going to be doing is cutting a slither out that goes underneath the track, and then these either side will just be dropped lower, and that's where all the scenery will be, or there'll be foam sat on top of the plywood basically, and the plywood will just add some structure. So it's like an open frame baseboard, except I am filling the frame with plywood lower down, if that makes sense. But I'll show you that as we move on. If we look just down here, I have completed the end piece. This one was much easier than the other one because I didn't have to match it to the previous board. It's basically just another support for the branch line back there, support for the main lines, just a little diagonal for no reason. And then this bit here is just to support the back scene, which will be curving round that way, but we'll be moving on to that just in a while. So what I'm going to be doing is marking up where I think the tracks need to go. So the way I'm going to do this is I've got this paper cutout here for a start. I've also got the diorama that I've started so far, which is actually the scenery that will be just in front of the track. So that will help me shape where the track needs to go. And then finally, the pièce de résistance. I've got a bit of wood with some pencils taped to either side. Okay, so I'm on my wide-angle lens on my phone. You can see I've got those cut, glued and pinned in place. So these edge pieces are all glued in, and I actually use these to square up the board a bit. This frame is coming together really, really well because it's all pre-cut. The only place we've got a bit of misalignment is down here, and that's because there's a gap to take up the slack from the other board not being quite square. The track bed itself at the moment is just slotted in place. If we come down low, you can see it does actually have I think it's a 1.5 or a 2% incline, and this is just how it's worked out on my computer. And what I'm going to be doing is basically reinstating some sort of supports underneath. Obviously here I need to cut out a slot to put the bridge in, and I'll be showing you more about the bridge in just a bit. But yeah, you can see this is quite floppy. Okay, so the track bed for the main lines is pretty much in. So obviously coming from the storage yard here, we're at a gentle slope up. I think it's about just under 2% or something, or 1.5%. And it starts there, so that's flat. That's going to be level with the storage yard. Then coming along here, we start to slope up. So you can see what I actually ended up doing was I clamped this bit of timber on top, and that just stopped the plywood moving at all. So the plywood is definitely set to a steady incline. And just down here, this was the first support to go in. This bit's flat. Then from here it slopes up, and I put the next support in just attached to this centre beam here. And then the third support is on an extra bit of timber. You can see it's glued and pinned on either side of the gap. And then a bit of plywood in there. And that's exactly the same way that support over there is made. There's an extra bit of timber. Just the same stuff that's up there is glued and pinned on either side. And then a bit of plywood as an upright is glued and pinned to that. So I think it's looking quite good. I may end up coming back and adding another support here and perhaps over here. But for now, I think it's plenty strong enough as it is, and I'm going to crack on. So yeah, but I'm pretty impressed with how this is going together. Using this timber that I got pre-cut, the square edges make it so much easier. So anyway, the next stage I think is going to be to add the incline section along the back. and then to work out how the backscene works. It's a slightly more complex backscene on this board than I've done before, because it's going to start straight here and then curve round at the end, and I'm not quite sure how I'm going to pull that off. I may end up carrying on with that tomorrow, but I'm certainly now going to try and get in the raised section along the back, and then at least start looking at the backscene before I finish for the evening. Okay, so the raised section is in along the back. That's 9mm ply on some 18mm legs there. Again, same as I've done all day today, just glued and pinned. You can see there's actually a slight cutout in it here. I'll show you a screenshot of my diagram here. The foam that's going on top is a Wooden Scenics incline, a foam riser set, and I'm going to use the hot wire foam cutter to cut an arch into the bottom of it. I'm hoping it's going to have enough strength. If it doesn't, I might have to come back and fiberglass it or something like that to just add some integrity. But basically, the track work under here gets a little bit too close to the branch line back there. It was unavoidable to try and get this curve as sort of loose as possible and not have a kink in the track. So I decided, why not have it go slightly underneath the incline of the branch line. If we look down here, you can see I've actually got a cutout in the track bed. Now this is where that road bridge I keep talking about is going to go. So obviously the shops are going to sit here, road's going to go back here, off into the distance, and I'll paint it onto the backscene. And then to cross it, what I've got here is a little bridge. So this is scratch built. It's literally just some plasticard glued together. Then on the front is a 3D printed girder, and there's actually some 3D printed girders underneath as well. And all I've done here is just put in some 18mm ply underneath, glued and pinned that. And then I've put some cork on just to raise it to the right height, and that sits in there pretty perfectly. Some sanding and fettling to do, but I'm pretty happy with how that is working out. Okay, so that's the board looking pretty good. The final job for the day then is going to be to paint it. So this is something I didn't do on the last board, but I've actually now purchased some Dulux satin wood quick dry in a natural slate colour, so it's just a light grey. And the idea is I'm going to paint the entire board, and this should hopefully seal it a little bit and stop any moisture getting into the plywood really, and stop it warping or anything bad like that. Whilst I'm at it, I'm actually also going to paint the underside at least of the viaduct board, because that's not been painted, as you can see there, that's unprotected. So I'm going to spend the rest of the evening, I'll watch some TV, I'll paint these boards up and leave them to dry overnight, and then I'll come back to you with the next segment.
Several months later.
Okay then, so as you've seen in previous videos, I got carried away and started taking photos instead of videos, but hopefully I can show you some more progress anyway before the end of this video. So I did get the baseboard painted there, using that slate grey paint just to seal it all off. I've painted all the surfaces, which did take quite a while actually to get into all of the nooks and crannies and cover the entire framework with that grey paint. The only surface that I've not painted is the front edge there, and that's because I was going to glue and pin the fascia on, and I thought the wood glue would get a better hold without any paint beneath it. I then painted and weathered up the bridge there that's going to go over the road. Again, that was a 3D print and plasticard scratch build. So I've glued that in with hot glue, just got it to the right height, glued it in, and then I've come back with my orbital sander and sanded off the hot glue there, and also sanded off the approach, where there seemed to be a little bit of a hump in the plywood there, but that all sanded out quite well. The next stage was installing the back scene. Very few photos of this, but it was quite an annoying process actually. So to form it into shape then, I ended up coming along with some water straight out of the kettle, along with some cold water I think as well, and just gently curving around the plywood, whilst it was nice and wet, and then as it dried it started to hold its shape. Then came along and pinned it all into place. So this is a photo after it's been pinned, and you can see I came along and sealed it along the bottom just to make sure it can't lose its curve, and then it's pinned all the way along the back to the section that will hold the incline at the rear. On the right hand side then you can see there is some extra bits of plywood added on. That's because I made a slight error when I ordered it online and ordered my bit of plywood slightly too small. I don't know how I didn't notice that. And also the clamps there that are holding another scrap of wood. So where it exits seam there, I I cut quite a gaping hole. I did use a cardboard template, as you might have caught a glimpse of in a previous clip, but somehow I just didn't notice that I'd cut my tunnel portal too high. So yes, really happy with the curve and the way it came out in the end. There is a little bit of a support structure behind it on the right hand side as well, but I don't have any photos of that necessarily. Okay then, so my next trick was to lay the track. So again, I'm using Pico Code 75 bullhead, as I did before, but also today, for this section of track, I decided to add some concrete sleeper track, just for a bit of variance. So my first job, cut the cork into slithers, the same width as my metal ruler there. It works quite well. And then I came along and just glued it down with some wood glue and put the track on top. Again, using my Rubicon cans there to weigh it down. It's just quite a useful way. You can buy a massive pack of drinks really cheap and you get to drink them afterwards. So here you can see I've actually got the first track glued down and it's formed quite nicely. And then the rear track there is not actually pinned in place, that's just roughly placed to get an idea. You can also see I've temporarily put a split pin hinge on the front of the layout there, and I'll come to that again just in a minute. Okay then, so before I installed the concrete sleeper track for the rear main line there, I actually came along and redid the sleeper spacing just so it matched my bullhead track a little bit better. So following a similar method to many other people, I cut out every couple of sleepers and then 3D printed my own spacer and just respaced the sleepers. It's in a case again of gluing that in place and weighing it down on top of the cork. So here you can see both tracks glued down. The ends there have got some copper-clad sleepers on and they're glued in place. I've also then just slotted in that diorama scene just where it's going to finally sit, and I've put the fascia on and painted it black. You can see as well there I've got a MERG C-bus handset plug just installed into the fascia. Taking a look around the back then, you can see the tracks there glued in place, and also those copper-clad sleepers I was talking about. Those are DCC concepts. Again, the rails are just soldered to those and they're glued in place with some super glue and some wood glue. And then also you can see just in the centre of the screen there my very rough cut support structure for that seam of the Backscene. Okay then, so it was then time to start the wiring, and I've wired this layout in a different way than I think I've wired any of my layouts ever before. So you can see here the boards flipped up on their back, quite a satisfying view there, all the structure underneath painted that nice grey colour. And it's then time to come along and put the wiring in. So amongst this mess, you can see I started with bus wires. So at the top we've got the C-bus bus wire, that's 12 volts and 2 signal wires, and that's for the MERG modules. Then at the bottom we've got a bundle of bus wires, so we've got a 12 volt bus there, and then we've got various track buses. So again I'm splitting this into sections as I'm going to aim to separate those into districts. This just means if I get a short on one bit of track, all of the trains won't stop at the same time. If we have a look at the end of that board then you can see some PCBs with some connectors on. Now this is a custom design of mine that I've designed on my laptop, then sent off to PCBWay, not a sponsor, and that just uses 24-pin ATX connectors, like you get for a PC power supply, to give me 24-pin connectors at the end of each baseboard. So these have got quite a high current rating, also really convenient 24-pin connector that's nice and small. I've used terminal blocks that are pluggable in the past, but they do end up taking up a lot of space. The more connections you want, really. So yeah, I thought this was a nice neat way to get 24 connections relatively cheaply. They've got two LEDs on there, so they've got a C-bus 12 volt LED and a 12 volt bus LED, and this is actually really useful in troubleshooting because I did have a dodgy connection somewhere on one of my 12 volt buses. Then on the other side you can see a jumper pin, and that will put a 120 ohm resistor on my C-bus line, and if you know MERG, that'll make sense to you. If you don't worry about it. You're never going to have to use it for a normal set of railway wiring. Here you can see the board starting to come to its final form then. This A4 piece of plasticard with various electricity mounted on it is all to do with my automation. So I'll do a proper video on this in the future. But the gist is the large square there with lots of black current coils. That is a DTC-8A current detecting module from MERG. That's then connected in the middle to a CAN V out, which sends the signals to my laptop. And then on the far right is a set of relays. Effectively, all this board achieves is detecting whether there's a train in each block of track, sending it to my laptop through the CAN-V out, and then also allowing me to turn off relays, so that's for the signals and the building lighting, again from my laptop. Looking at the wiring then, so I've actually wired my dropper wires to the bus, this time using soldered connections. I thought I'd go back to basics. Soldering 2 wires together is probably one of the most secure connections if you do it properly. I've spaced out all of the wires so there's no shorts on them, and I will be coming back in the future and adding liquid electrical tape over all of my solder joints just to keep it nice and protected against shorts. It was then a case of plugging in my controller, so that's my MERG controller there, my own assembly of MERG circuit boards in the aluminium case, and then I've also got my own 3D printed controller there on the left of the screen. That's just a prototype. I think I will be coming back and probably just using the MERG design. Plug that into my laptop, flashed up the MERG programming tool, programmed up those detection blocks, and I can verify they all work, so I can have a loco in any section of track, and yeah, my laptop will sense it. I can also turn off each of the lights on the relay board. Okay, so as I mentioned, there is a signal on that relay board, and that is just a block signal as the trains leave the scene and go towards the storage yard, and that's again from Absolute Aspects. So to install it, I came along with a piece of plywood, put in the socket board and PCB underneath the plywood, put the wires in, and that's all hot glued into place, and then you simply slot the Absolute Aspect signal into the socket, and there we go. It looks really, really good. Currently lit up with a red aspect, but I can change that using my laptop. Okay then, so this is how I left the module when I left my parents' house on the 1st of January this year. So you can see the Backscene's installed, that's ready to be sanded and painted, and I'm hoping to make a video on how I paint Backscenes. I'm also hoping to add a lighting rig to both these modules, so I'll hope to be making a video on that too. Looking at the scenery on this board then, you can see the front there, that's crying out for a scenic embankment, and that's actually going to have a horse field down the front of it. We've then got that diorama I made in a previous video, which has got the local shops, and just behind it a model of my childhood home. Again, much more information coming on these soon. So I will be visiting my parents in the coming weeks, and as I said, I'm going to be painting the back scene, adding a lighting rig, and then just cracking on with scenery. I will be trying out some new scenic techniques. I did a poll on my page the other day about using grass mats, so I'm going to try that. And I've also just bought myself a WWS static grass applicator to replace my homemade one, and we'll see if it's any better. Right, I look forward to seeing you in the future. Bye for now.